Okay, so HBO's Road to Redemption begins. We hope. They've just released a official teaser for their House of the Dragon show. It's a prequel to Game of Thrones based primarily around the Targaryens, Daenerys' ancestors, when they were the ruling family in Westeros. Alright, so this is a very similar shot to what we've seen underneath Dragonstone in the caverns. We saw that in season, was it 7 or 8 of Game of Thrones? I don't see much reason for them to be down there specifically. So what I think this might actually be is the black cells beneath King's Landing, where we saw Ned Stark held at the end of season 1. This became a very significant place later because it was where all the dragon skulls that were meant to be in the big throne room were kept once Robert Baratheon became the king. So this is probably the shores of Dragonstone. It looks a bit too beachy to be King's Landing. So 200 years, I think that confirms that it is the Dance of the Dragons. Because I think it was 300 years would be Aegon's conquest when he first came and took over the whole country. And the fall of the throne that it's talking about is Robert's Rebellion.
Gods.
The quality is really weird in this picture. And it's probably even worse in YouTube compression, so I'm very sorry. I assume this is our first look at Vhagar. And here we see the Hand of the King badge. I haven't read Fire and Blood yet. I'm going to before this show comes out. Fire and Blood is essentially a book filled with the backstory on the Targaryens during their reign. So because I haven't read it yet, I can't remember who the Hand of the King was during this time. I mean, maybe there was like 5, because that's what happened in the main Game of Thrones show. So I'm not quite certain who this is yet.
Kings.
And so this, I believe, is the sword called Blackfire. This was the, well, they had several, but this was the primary Valyrian steel sword of the Targaryen house. It was the sword that King Aegon I used when he first came into Westeros. It's essentially this full black Valyrian steel sword. I think you can see some of that down here, and it's got this wing pattern and also this kind of serpentine handle. And he's also got this like Targaryen signet ring, which is very cool. And again, I need to read Fire and Blood because I can't remember who this king is. And so the sword Blackfire, it has a very large role to play. Maybe not in this show, House of the Dragon, or at least the first seasons, but it has a huge role to play in Targaryen history down the line past the Dance of the Dragons.
Fire.
And again, I haven't read Fire and Blood, so I can't remember who this is.
And blood.
And so Doctor Who, and I don't know who this is. I think I did read that this is Daemon Targaryen, so not to be confused with the Daemon Blackfire, who will eventually become a major character. A huge thing to know going into House of the Dragon, if they're faithful to the books, they reuse names a lot, so it could get very confusing.
Fire. And blood.
They said Fire and Blood, which is the Targaryen house motto, kind of like how the Stark house motto is winter is coming, so it's the way they believe the heart of their family is, how they are conquerors. So this appears to be a tournament or something. It's really hard to tell what's going on. Let me see if I can... Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't really tell who this is, but I guess it's just some sort of melee tournament. Like, there's weapons laid out here, so this doesn't look like it's not meant to be happening. This looks like a competition. Alright, so this is Corlys Velaryon, and I remember him quite a bit from the World of Ice and Fire book. There's been a lot of controversy around his casting, and here's my take on it. A lot of people think they're just trying to shove SJW politics into Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, and so they have turned a character who was very white, they've made him black. Now, if the actor's good for the role, I think they really should take that into account. But a big idea I think they're missing with House Targaryen and House Velaryon, they're very intermarried, they're basically the same family. So House Velaryon is also a Valyrian family. They were in Westeros before the Targaryens were. They weren't a major Valyrian family. They never had dragons in ancient Valyria, but they are very ethnically Valyrian. And the problem, you could say, with making one of them black, or potential problem, is the Valyrians, they were really racist. The Valyrians built an empire on slavery and racial superiority. So just making one of the Valyrians black kind of is like pretending that the Valyrians weren't as horrible as they were. If you want to make a statement about racism, it's very easy to do by making the Valyrian characters have this complex of racial superiority, which they did have in the books. I still think this can work, because so long as the other members of the family are sort of against him. Otherwise, they're kind of just throwing out a very large element of the world building and kind of squandering a bigger opportunity than they wanted to actually talk about these issues. So this is the main hall of the Red Keep, which we saw many times in Game of Thrones. It's hard to say what the occasion is, but it's definitely very festive. Maybe a wedding or something. Could that be the same Valyrian steel dagger that was used to try and kill Bran, and in the show they later gave it to Arya? It might be, because you'd think the only people who would have like a dragon bone handle Valyrian steel dagger in this time period would be a Targaryen. That's a prop that definitely could come back. Okay, so this is definitely a tournament type scenario given that they're jousting. And you can see in the background here, there is the sigil of House Tarly. So that is Samwell Tarly from the main Game of Thrones show. Is this an actual fight, or is this like a sparring session? It doesn't look very formal. Is this guy in the background kind of scrambling to, I don't know, stop them or get away from them? And they look very much like they're trying to hurt each other. So, again, I don't know who these characters are. I don't see any noticeable Valyrian steel. This one definitely looks Targaryen or Velaryon.
Dreams didn't make us kings.
I love this throne. So, you might be going, hang on. The Iron Throne, it's looking a little more spiky than it was during the time of the Game of Thrones series. The reason for that is in the books, the throne is massive. You know how there's that scene in the show where Peter Baelish is going, there aren't even 200 swords. They're trying to get a message across of, oh, so the legends are overblown with time. That was kind of a good way of addressing the fact that, I'm guessing for budget reasons or just set reasons, they just wanted to have a smaller throne. But in the books, it's huge. And they seem to have kept a very similar height of the throne, but they're definitely trying to add more swords. And I don't know if this makes it to 1,000, because there are meant to be 1,000 blades melted into the throne, but this definitely is better, and it's making the throne look a hell of a lot more intimidating.
Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did.
That line is incredibly important. It's someone in the Targaryen family. I think that's the voice of Daemon. It's someone in the Targaryen family acknowledging, look, basically every Highborn family ever has dreams of conquest. The reason we won is because of the dragons. And that is one of the biggest parts of this entire series of the Dance of the Dragons. Because you might be wondering, when Daenerys' father, the Mad King, was fighting Robert's rebellion, where the hell were all the dragons? That is a huge part of this series and what happened to the dragons. Then this show explains what left them so vulnerable that Robert Baratheon and Ned Stark could overthrow the Mad King. Okay, well, thank you for watching this breakdown of the new House of the Dragon teaser. I definitely will be covering this show, and I'll probably eventually go back and make some Game of Thrones content as well, so stay tuned.